So we made a start on our coolant lines. So all the tubing I've used is all the old vrod stuff. Just trying to utilize what we've got lying around, because man, this card is getting out the gate expensive. But nonetheless, I wanted to use this filler neck off the factory vrod solely because it had a lot of shape into it, and it steps down. It looks quite nice, I reckon. Looks like a bit of thought's been put into it instead of just going straight up, because that's what I was going to do. I was originally just going to do this one here and then go straight up here. So everything clear so far. I haven't tested this one, but this one here cleared pretty good. The AN16 fitting on here, as I say, cut the thermostat housing off, welded that up. It was popping and banging a bit, to be expected. You can only get it as clean as you can get it, really. Being that it's had coolant running through it already, we've tried putting the die grinder up there with a flapper wheel and clean as much of the scale as we could get off there. But nonetheless, I think it's going to work out. We're going to pressure test this whole system anyway, and the radiator when we make it, just to make sure there's going to be no holes and no leaks. Shot to the water pump side now. We've cut the flare off there, same as the thermostat housing. We've made it this little angle here. It's out of the old vrod coolant lines as well, and here goes the other one that's going to go on top of that. So we just need to weld it all up. Here goes the coolant line adapters all done. As you can see, all the angles this needed to go on. So if you look at it from this angle here, obviously need to come out, and then obviously go to a 90-degree bend as well, and also twist that way. As for the thermostat housing, pretty self-explanatory. Got our filler neck there. It's the highest point of the whole motor, so we're going to have no issues bleeding it. Look at it down that way. You can sort of see again the shaper needed to come out this way to clear the block. Probably took about 3 or so hours to make these. They look really simple, but I think what it was utilizing the factory coolant lines. Obviously they're contaminated and they keep popping and banging and stuff, so the welds, got a couple of holes here and there, so had to fill them out, so couldn't get nice uniform welds over them. But nonetheless, it's going to work. Once they're powder coated, it shouldn't look too bad. Here we have them all on the cart now. Nice clean lines, everything's running parallel. Likewise when you look down there, perfectly even spacing, nice tight tolerances. If you look down in here, it just clears the fin there. Likewise to these, everything's adjustable and everything's moving well. If you look at this part here, just clearing there as well. Likewise to the fuel rails. Reason why everything's this type of shape is because I wanted to hide that fuel rail as it's really ugly. So if you look at it from here, it hides it quite well. So there we have it, all done. So what we're going to move on to next is finishing off the radiator. So for core placement, we're looking at something like this. Obviously it will be aligned, and I'm thinking because we don't have a lot of clearance down the bottom there, I'm probably going to make it a twin pass. So the inlet will come in one side, loop back around, come back out the other side, then both inlet and outlet will be at the top, and then all they need to do is travel to there and there. So nice short path for them, keep it nice and tidy. And this core here actually nearly has double the heat exchange area of the factory vrod, and it doesn't look good. It's quite a small looking radiator, but in theory that should be better. So as I say, if it doesn't work out, no big deal. We either loop it up and make 2 of them, or we just make a completely bigger one. So let's make a start on this radiator core. So what we've done so far is remove the excessive material on the header plate, also on the bottom of this, because this would have been a big radiator. It's obviously been cut down, so we got rid of the excessive material there, because we're going to make some end caps for this once it's all done. So what we've done, we've marked out and cut out on the bandsaw our lower header tank. So what we can do now is fold it up and then think of a design for the top half. So here goes the lower header tank shaped out now. I wanted to do radiuses on the end like how I've done the Altezza stuff, solely because it looks like a little bit more effort's been put into it rather than just looking like a folded banana box. So obviously still need to tune it up and do our gaps and deburr it, but basically that gets the gist of it, so we can tape it on. And think how we're going to do the top one, throw it all into the cart, make sure it's all going to clear and everything, then weld it out. Also make some end tanks as well, just for the aesthetics, to tidy it up and make it look nice. We've marked out our top tank, and then we're just going to go for the same as this bottom one, just replicate that. Reason being is we're actually running out of headspace above the top header tank, so I can't really have it too much higher. You'll soon see why once we do all the AN lines, because they don't bend too well, being quite a big diameter. So therefore we can't have it too high because it'll be too much of a sharp angle. So therefore we'll just keep it simple. I'm a little bit gutted doing it this way, but nonetheless it's going to work. And then we'll have our, say this is the top half, just our 2 fittings there for divider plate. Here's the folds, nice and square, nice 90-degree bends. How we fold the ends up, we just do it by hand in the end. Just run it around this radius, it's only 2 mil, so use it like Play-Doh basically. Slowly bring it around. Here goes the top header tank all done now. Just got to tap it around as you can see. So it's roughed out for the now. We'll tape it back on at the bottom one, throw it back on the cart, and I'll explain how we're going to do the inlets and outlets. Right, so now we're going to make the shroud and the top caps all as one piece. So we got our little lip that will sit over here. And then this next 72mm one here will be this part here, the top cap. And then the center section will be where the fans are, through the center there. Another top cap, and then just a little lip over there just to tidy things up. So let's go fold and cut that up. I've cut the plate out obviously, it's all marked out. As you can see, I've added the two 10mm lips. How I've achieved that is by using the old school little e-swig. You might have seen how I've done the oil coolers and radiator and stuff on the Altezza videos here on YouTube. So it wasn't worth repeating it. But nonetheless, we'll use the hammer to hit it over and then just quickly linish it off with a fine Rolock just to get rid of all the dents and stuff. So it's running nice and true now. So what we need to do now is put it on the linisher, get that face running nice again, and then yeah, do our fold here, and then obviously we have to cut out our fan holes. Just like that, all of our components are made for our radiator. Here goes our lower header tank. Here goes our top one. Obviously it's split in half because it's going to be running a divider plate, which obviously will make it a twin pass for obvious reasons. So inlet and outlet are on the same side. Here's our fan shroud all made, got our riv nuts in there. So how we cut that out was just drilled a hole and then use the jigsaw. It's no fun watching that. Just got to do our final sanding, get rid of all that off there. Everything's running nice and true now. So basically, final sand up, weld it all together. Ready for the big welder now, so everything's all prepped up now, all the edges are all done. So what we're going to be doing first are these AN fittings, because you see how they are there. They're going to be quite close together, and we've got to get a run down the middle as well for that divider plate. So yeah, we'll do those first, do the tanks, and then the fan shroud will be last. And with the magic of a YouTube, here we have our little radiator built. Pretty happy with how it turned out. Nice little fat slugs here, some dreadlocks. These Chinese cores definitely ain't like the old PWR cores, well, that's for sure. But nonetheless, not the worst looking welds, but obviously not the best either. They're definitely acceptable. Pretty self-explanatory, the whole thing. So the reason why I put the fans on the back side is solely because some of these fins here were dented, but we'll straighten them up as much as we can. Bolt the fans on, and that should be the whole radiator done. There we have it. Not bad considering it costs nothing to make. Here it is with the fans on it. That is just a fluke that it was the exact size, basically, like maybe half a mil overhang. Actually nothing really. So basically the size for size, you couldn't have guessed that any better. Well, as I say, it's just a fluke. So we'll sit it on the cart and you'll see roughly how it's all going to look. So here it is sitting on the cart. This is where its rough placement's going to be. Obviously give or take, we've got to still align it. So hopefully we can shift this shock to the outside of this frame here. I'm not too sure if it's going to work. Be a reason why I've got it on the inside, but nonetheless, hopefully we can shift it to that side. Therefore we'll be able to drop the shock down a lot more. Oh, sorry, the radiator down. But overall, that's what it's going to look like, something like that. So what up to now is having to relocate the shocks. Obviously they were previously sitting here and outside the rail, so now they're basically sitting in line. Reason being is we didn't have enough clearance for the radiator. That's no big deal, so we've marked out a bit of an idea for a plate, and then we'll drill a hole here for the shock, and then we can mount it that way. So here's our little template, basically the same as that one there. So we're doing a double up like that one there. This one here's actually going to get boxed in as well once we flip it upside down before we sandblast it. So that's going to go there. And then to fill up the void between the shock and here, we'll just make up a little spacer. Job done, so let's go and cut them out. So here we have it tacked in. So as you can see how it's all going to work out now. So once we've welded that one in, we'll flip to the other side, do that, and job done. Shocks are relocated. Sweet, that was a nice quick job, hour or so to relocate those shocks. As you can see, the new mounts are all welded in, linished off, and that's where they're going to sit. We also machined up our spacers. As you can see there, the tapered spacers, you probably can't quite tell, but there are tapered spacers, so you go from the 12mm, then step up to a bigger flange. Just looks a little bit nicer, looks like a bit of thought's been put in to it instead of just making something parallel. But nonetheless, that's how it's all going to sit. Radiator's got ample clearance down there, down the side there next to the shock. So what we can do now is mount the radiator, and then once we've done that, we can move on to the oil cooler. So to our next plan now, which is to mount the radiator. So now we have this lower part here. We can make a brace off there for the lower half of the radiator. As for the top one, we'll go off this engine cross member. This mount here needs to be cut off because if you remember from the earlier videos, that's where I originally had the shocks, but the shocks weren't strong enough to push the cart up there. So yeah, we've got to quickly think about how we're going to make these. Had a quick think, and for the now what we're going to do is use these stainless steel mounts for the bottom. So it's a bit of tube. We'll drill a hole in there so it'll be nice and strong, TIG weld it around, and then we'll bend them up, and then we'll solid mount it. We'll bolt it to the lower half of the radiator header, and then as for the top half, we'll have it a pin style somehow so it's still floating between some grommets. So basically only the lower half will be bolted, and this half up here will be exaggerated floating. You actually won't be able to move it, but there'll still be some wiggle room in there for it to take up a bit of vibration. So I think we're going to run with that. Real simple, so we've bent these to 30 degrees. What we've used is a tube bender and a tube cutter. Real simple, keeps the cuts nice and accurate, like that. So now we need to deburr them and then make the rest of it up. So here goes our lower mount. Welded on that side there. So it's got to do the weld on bungs onto the bottom of that tank and drill the holes out in this bottom cross member thing, and that'll be the bottom of it mounted. As you can see with the laser, we've now centered the radiator, so that way there we can now transfer it down to here. Then we can mark out our bolt hole spacing for the lower mount, drill that out, weld that in, weld the bosses onto the radiator, and job done. So we now have it sitting in place, just got to weld it up, and that's basically it. Now about to weld our bosses on. I'm making our top mount, pretty simple really, a few holes there. I just put that there for a bit of design, or just a bit of a relief cut. I don't know, see what it looks like when it's done. So it's got to cut out with the bandsaw obviously, put a one fold there, radius the corners, weld it onto the end tank. There's a top mount all made now, so it's going to sit up there like that. So just got to prep it up and then weld it on. Here's the radiator finally completed. As you can see, we've got our top mount now on there, bent to 30 degrees to match the rest of the angle of these adapters that are coming out of the coolant line. We've got a weld there, likewise for the other side. There goes our bosses for the lower half. All in all, pretty happy to finally get this project done. So what we need to do now is throw it back in the cart and make the mount from the engine cross member to this, and then it's finally the whole cooling side of things is fully done for the water side. At the final stage, so I'll just cut out this little top plate, chamfered it and stuff. So it's going to bend this till 45, mount that to the engine cross member, and that's going to be the radiator completely mounted. Now we finally have a radiator in place. That has taken way longer than it should have to make this whole radiator and mounting it. Mounting it actually took the longest part, especially that lower half. So there it is, all done. Nice straight radius there. Then on the back side, all done. So we've tacked it in for the now. Bear in mind this here is a redundant bracket we had for the shock, so that's going to come out, and we'll fully weld it once we flip it upside down to sandblast it. But nonetheless, pretty happy with how everything turned out. As I say, very tight tolerance. This would have taken a lot quicker if it was a car. You think about a car, there's no clearance issues. You just put it hard up against the radiator support, make some tabs, job done. You ain't got to worry about clearance like this part here. So this goes up and down obviously. You got our shock. As you can see, it just clears on the side there. So as I say, took a long time, but yeah, pretty happy with the results. All the angles worked out bang on, because you got to bear in mind there was so much thought put into this, because you can only buy certain degree fittings. You know, you got like a 30, 45 and so on when it comes to these AN fittings, so you didn't have a lot of angles to choose from, and I wanted this to sit low, so I didn't want it to stick outside the body. And yeah, as I say, just a lot of mucking around to know exactly what our angle is going to be in clearance, but nonetheless, we're done. We can now move on to the oil cooler. Here goes the oil cooler we're going to utilise in the cart. It's a factory vrod one. As you can see, this bike had been in a bit of a prang. So a bit of a backstory to that was, when I bought this bike, I didn't check up on it because it was supposedly a Harley importer, and they'd been relatively well known. Obviously not in the business now for obvious reasons, selling bikes like this. So I didn't bother doing a background check to see if it's been deregistered. He just said it was a brand new import, and yeah, they just got it back on the road. But what actually happened wasn't until I actually got the bike, because I brought it sight unseen, just thinking they're a trustworthy source. Long story short, it was definitely been an accident. So I ended up parting this bike out because I didn't want to give myself a bad name by selling a bike that had so much damaged parts that were just jimmied up to, just to make a bit of money off it. So I ended up just parting this bike out. I just thought that was morally the best thing to do with this bike, and yeah, so it's one less dodgy bike on the road. So anyhow, that's how we come across a lot of these old school parts here. So we just need to put in the press or something, and we'll try and straighten this thing out. Our cooler's all straightened up now, so we've prepped it up. We're ready to weld our little end caps on, and that's how we're going to mount it. So weld them on there, drill 3 holes per side. Job done. Now I'm not complaining with that. Look how nice and straight they came out, considering still not perfect, but it was a lot better than what it was, as you've seen. So all I did is put it in the press, tweaked around, had a bit of box section on each side, a couple of parallels trying to straighten it, squash it down this way, so at least it's running nice and true. There's no rock, no soft foot in it as such. So yeah, overall pretty happy with that, considering this oil cooler is 21 years old. I thought it was going to be a pretty manky going over the factory well, so I just ground them back as much as I could, and yeah, it came up relatively tidy. Pretty happy with that, considering this cost me nothing to make. Now this has been the longest part of this whole build, doing the cooling setup, the oil cooler. Real quick job. I've probably only spent about 4 hours all up to get it to this stage all complete. So we made a little stainless steel frame underneath there, 4 riv nuts, job done. So we've got to add some fans to this. I just haven't got any yet, so hopefully we can find some real small fans. We'll put 2 on there, because basically this cart's going to be stationary all the time doing its burnouts. It's going to get no airflow underneath there, because I was going to make a ducting underneath there, but I think because we don't have a lot of ground clearance either, and the way it's pretty close to the ground to start with, so I think we should put some fans on there. But nonetheless, that's us all done. I think we'll wrap this video up here and keep all the cooling to one video, the cooling side of things. So what we're going to do next is the fuel setup. So we'll be making a fuel tank, setting up the fuel regulator, modifying the fuel rail quite a lot to make it all work. But I think we're all done, so not far before we start it up.